how are people doing? What have we mostly lost? Australia, it looks like. You know, it's the middle of the night. China, Japan. I think we've lost most of those folks. Oh, I see Rayo. How was the platform for people? You know, I mean, this was totally a first for us. So we're trying to figure out how to use technology to create some of the kind of intimacy that you might find in a meeting. But how has it worked? How's the platform work?
I use my personal computer Linux to join the conference. I can use my my professional computer on Windows.
And anybody else? How has Quico been?
Worked okay for me because mostly it was just sharing the slides. The actual video component is negligible, but the ability to chat on the side also while speakers talking was pretty good.
That's great. Have the leads dropped their content into this closing session deck?
Oh, no.
I didn't. Okay. I have nothing actually to
I was not
drop
aware
here.
that we had to. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to drop the into the chat window, and I'm going to talk a little bit about LF energy. So you have a couple of minutes to do that.
All right.
I guess Naomi just did it.
Okay.
So why don't you do that? And you know what I'm going to do is just talk for a little bit about LF energy and you know our membership model and answer any questions that you might have about that. You know our goal for doing this is to build community, and you know we really feel like we're at. I'll actually turn the video on. I have no idea how my hair is. That was a joke.
We're all of
Okay. Yeah. Can you guys see me?
Yes.
Yes.
As well? Okay.
You're lovely, Shuri.
Oh, Benoit, you are such a charmer. Okay. So membership model. So you know, the basic essence of LF Energy and any of the Linux Foundation projects is that we cooperate on 80% of the stack, and then we create, you know, competition and products and services in the marketplace. So the idea is not to cannibalize capital, but to actually help us change floors. So I think of it a little bit like rather than rearranging the decks on the Titanic, we're actually trying to go up a floor. And that's the reason why most of our decks, this one didn't, which is fine, start with a pre-competitive, you know, comment, which is around that when you have competitors working together, and that's not necessarily true for utilities, but it's certainly true for vendors, that you want to make sure that people really understand that we are not that we are not producing any kinds of conflicts with regards to you know, people are working together. So, you know, at its essence, what LF Energy is about is leverage development and open source software ecosystem. And underneath it, what it is that we're providing and what the value is around leadership and support. And that is both me and Jeffro and Naomi, and also being able to, you know, we used a technical writer in order to be able to support really transferring the data architecture document from a narrative to actually beginning to build something that starts to become a framework. We also are able to bring in other resources from the Linux Foundation, like we have a guy named Lev that came from CNCF, who helped us really build out our landscape. And so that becomes a really important part of where the value is, that when folks become members of the Linux Foundation, that's where it goes to. Then marketing and public relations. I mean, our job is to get your voices out into the world. Training and talent. I think that probably starting in 2021, we will begin really actively building out training and talent, white labeling some of the cloud related training so that folks who are delivering cloud services, for instance, within the energy realm are doing it in a certified way, and that people really understand security. I think that David Wheeler is here, and he's been participating. He, heads up the core infrastructure initiative, being able to do the kind of work that Bart and Florent have been working on. Badging and certification. We have a couple of different softwares that are coming in that we will begin to be able to do certification on, and IP and legal support. When you bring in your software, we help you figure out how to remove any kind of barriers to IP ownership and costs. And then finally, global events. We have a great event team that has made something like this happen. So that's really what the benefit is. The model is very simple. We have premier members, and that's a flat fee. You have to join both the Linux Foundation and LF Energy, and it's a 2-year commitment. And then there's general membership that's based on a sliding scale. Membership is incredibly important in order to be able to support being able to deliver these things to you guys. However, with that said, and I really, really want to continue to reiterate this, one of the great things about open source is that if you come and you contribute and you participate and you are seen, as somebody who is really part of the community, it does not matter whether you're a member or not. What it matters is what your contribution is. So, on this deck, you'll see that, we've kind of listed some of the membership benefits. I don't really want to do a big sales job on you guys. I really want to get at, kind of tying together and connecting the dots. But I do want you to see that, we're trying to build something here. And part of that is making sure that this ecosystem is healthy and supportive, and that we can really help make you guys successful at what you do in the world. That's my email. If you want to talk to Mike Dolan, he's the head of strategic programs. I think he was in and out a couple of times today. Mike is also an attorney and counsel for the Linux Foundation. So if you have questions around intellectual property, Mike's the guy to talk with. Our mailing lists are right there. If you haven't already, please join them. There's a join button on the website. We are getting a new website, but for now, you can find the join button there, and it goes directly into Salesforce, and hopefully we're going to get better at doing that. And so that's the end of my public service announcement. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay, well, you guys know how to find me. The footer of all my emails is my calendar. And, really, I try and make myself as available as possible to you all. So I'm going to turn this over. Sander, is it you or Eric who is going to do kind of the next steps on like what you guys did, where you're going? Which of you is going to take over?
Eric.
Okay. Please do.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't have time to edit this slide. We got great feedback from the group. We had a lot of interaction via Mentimeter. And we have had great introductions of people that do not really know standardization and semantics and interoperability yet, but also people that do know a lot about it and that it's very much needed. So we have a Mentimeter setup in which we came to conclusion that we indeed have to work on opening up the semantical standards that we would like to use for it to be adopted. That's one. So we talked a lot about SIM, of course, and we explained that we are working on that. So we will keep the group posted on that. Then we talked about what the major challenges were in relation to open source, and one of which was having open tools that generate standard data models or profiles. And we are going to look into that, and we also have probably 1 or 2 members that are willing to work on that with us. Then we got to know some new standards we would like to look at. So we exchanged a couple of standards. So we are also going to be in contact with people that joined that will help us out, and maybe we'll get in contact with each other to talk about the value of that. And then we also talked about the use cases that are of interest, and we have a list on that in the Mentimeter that we can share. So that will focus what we can start with. So there is a lot of interest, and people know the importance of data architecture. But also still a question was what's the relation to the functional architecture and the technical architecture and cybersecurity topics, for instance. So that's also an important one that we picked up, that we have to maybe link to how cybersecurity is covered in this interoperability topic. So and probably that will be also a topic that will be added to the work document, or at least referenced to the security architecture then. Yeah, I think we had a great session, and Sander made a very good presentation with the interaction in between. So we ran a bit out of time, but that was anticipated because I already thought that was going to happen. But we presented everything with a great interaction, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I think that's a pretty good result, and also probably a good start for involvement of new members. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. That's great. So I think that, I think all of us need to put on our listening hats for how these things interconnect. I mean, one of the things that I can say is that as a couple of years ago, when I was trying to show or talk about, what the grid of the future looks like, everything is in very siloed clumps. Even the great work that the IEC has done really has things, differentiated by high, medium, and low voltage, and which really creates barriers for interoperability. So I think that what you guys are doing and the kinds of questions that you're asking are really laying the foundations of, how do we take a data architecture and a security architecture, and I think we'll probably hear this also from the infrastructure group, and lay this down as a foundation that really enables interoperability regardless of where you are in the world, or what part of the energy system you're working on. So I hope that you kept all of that documentation, and that you'll be able to send back to us kind of more detail about next steps. Do you guys have a particular plan? Are you going to continue to have meetings? How are you thinking about moving forward? And it's okay if you don't know the answer to it yet.
No, we don't know
But
the
that's
answer.
the place I'd like us to get to.
So my idea, Sander speaking here, is to have office hours, weekly office hours, where open source projects can ask help with their data architecture for their open source projects, and we can improve our own data architecture document, release it first, and then improve it later on. And we also have an idea to start a data project, especially around tooling.
Okay, I like that. So do you want to drop the data architecture document in the window? That, you know, we're in process, everyone, totally in process. It took till 5 o'clock last night to even just get this draft together. But I think that we have a very ambitious vision that there will be a, you know, solid sort of data architecture document, canonical glossary, and a data project. And so that's kind of the direction that we're moving in. So I'm glad to hear that. And Sander, you'll be able to communicate with people and tell them where the office hours are, and, well, maybe the next folks are talking.
Yeah, if you're interested, join the data architecture mailing list.
Yeah.
And we can take it from there.
Yeah. And if you go to the mailing list, also, you know, you can become part of the data architecture group, and we absolutely welcome you. There's also a wiki, and Naomi, maybe you can drop the wiki link in, or Jeffro, so you guys see where things are, and, you know, that we're really trying to lay in an infrastructure that's going to allow this community to grow. Okay, I'm going to move us along. Thank you very much, Sander and Eric. Great job. Art and Florent, talk to us. David.
Yes. Can everybody understand me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we did, I think, a great session today. So we got a very good introduction of the use case that we did today for security risk analysis. So that was the GXF, the Grid Exchange Fabric. So Paul Houtman gives us a very good introduction in the use case. So that was very interesting. Then next, we performed a threat analysis. So we tried to identify all the threats that were applicable for certain top events. We also take a look at the right side, the consequences based on the threats. And then we got an idea about the risks that are relevant for this project, for this platform. And then we dived into the countermeasures that you can take. So the countermeasures to deal with the threats, so that are the preventive controls. But we also take a look at how can you mitigate, or you can limit the impact of the consequences. So the recovery controls. So we also dived into it. Well, we used the sticky notes tool, so that made it very interactive. So everyone was making sticky notes with threats, with consequences, with preventive controls, recovery controls. And then we tried in the last session, in the breakout session, we tried to bring everything together, with most of all also keeping in mind the introduction that David Wieder gave us in also the CII best practice badge, and also the insights that we can use in analyzing this use case. So yeah, Florent, I think more or less we did the same approach for the GXF use case as we did for the Compass module. It was very good to hear in the previous speaker about the LF Energy data architecture, that also for them security is a challenge. So we're looking forward to also do a risk analysis with that project for security. And yeah, in the end, we would like to go to every project for security and give a good advice. Florent, do you have to add something? Did I miss something?
Yeah, well, the one advice we can give to everyone right now is to go get some core infrastructures initiative badge, because one of the conclusion was that this badge would would already bring security to the project by assuring best practice and good processes. So go get your badge.
And the GXF, this is Dave Wheeler, and the GXF folks already did it, and I think they had a positive experience. They can speak up for themselves, but I don't think they found it terribly difficult.
So I think we could say that the grid exchange fabric is very mature for security, and that's also one of our main conclusions in our session that we had today. So they are easily getting the patch, but other projects that maybe are still in a design phase, I think the recommendation is go for the badge.
I think that that's really great. I mean, I think that one of the ways that we're really trying to distinguish ourselves is to make sure that security is baked in right from the beginning, and that it's transparent and everybody knows how we're going about doing it. It's not a mystery, and that we're also aligning with other projects at the Linux Foundation so that we are really kind of creating a hyper transparency with regards to our processes and how we're going about it. Do you want to, somebody want to drop what do you think the next steps are, Bart and Florent? And somebody want to put the mailing list in so that that folks can join the security group. Anything else, like in terms of next steps? How would you like to proceed? Where would you like to be at the end of the year? You know, how are we moving forward?
Well, I think moving forward is to do a very good analysis for a project of the Linux Energy Foundation. For the Compass module, we did it the last month, but now for the grid exchange fabric, well, we are looking forward also to take up the challenge to also do a risk analysis for the previous topic, so the LF energy data architecture. So I think we also have to dive into that. And then, yeah, when you have figured out which are the risks that are applicable, how can you use the patch to make it secure by design?
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. You are really good at what you do, and it's a pleasure to work with you guys. Okay, I'm gonna move us along. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. So Sven and Jeffro, talk to us about infrastructure, or Saeed.
Yeah, so I think we had a really good meeting. So as a starting point for the infrastructure working group, in the beginning we discussed about some common challenges what everybody has to make it really completely interactive, and yeah, we made some pretty good progress on how to define the infrastructure for the future. Actually, what we did was defining like a decision process and risk analysis, and actually how to define trust. During the session, we said that we want to use one of the use cases what was also discussed there, and we took actually also from Syed's opinion the asset monitoring plasma part to discuss for a future use case, and I think Syed wants to say something about this one.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sven. So we thought we'd pick one of the use cases that the breakout group's already working on, because then we can continuously validate against what they're doing and try to make our theoretical principles and guidelines more real. So asset monitoring we thought was a good one because going back to what Sven said, establishing the boundaries of cloud and what does cloud actually mean. In the example of asset monitoring, we can look at different deployments of the cloud model and build nuanced cloud infrastructure guidelines to help projects develop their work within their spheres. So what do I mean by that? If you look at we looked at the asset monitoring schematic that the group has been working on, and the first one is data acquisition. So data acquisition comes with its own set of challenges around edge computing and the security concerns that are associated with running edge computing on the cloud, but then also the enablers. For example, you can run machine learning algorithms on the edge to drive low latency requirements, for example. And this is a very key step because how you ingest the data drives use cases down the chain, because it increases the accessibility of the data. It opens up the data to even more use cases, to build more to enable utilities to build applications on top of that. And that takes us to the second bit, which is the services. So in the asset monitoring schematic, which is about doing the predictive maintenance and developing the applications for it in a modern application development setting, using microservices. And that helps utilities, especially utilities, innovate without fear. Because this is, utilities, of course, they want to innovate, but there are just so many concerns around, breaking the rules. So we need to demystify modern application development on the cloud for utilities so that they can go about, building applications and speed, which, solve their problems like asset monitoring. And then the third one is around administration, which is, really how can cloud be used to enable more granular levels of control over your data, over your operations, over the access to the data. So really providing guidelines on how infrastructure and cloud can enable utilities to do administration tasks. So, this is, we're just using asset monitoring as an example, but it applies everywhere. And then the fourth one was around, data and historical data and logs. And again, we want to be able to provide guidelines and reference models on how utilities can use big data and, data storage to do data mining to drive insights, because there's just so much data that utilities are often sitting on and doing nothing about it, but it can actually help them. And then the last one, which is super important, is around interfaces. And that is about how cloud can be used to increase the accessibility of all the great stuff, all the data ingestion, all the modern applications that utilities are building. How do you interface that to other organizations? For example, TSO, DSO coordination. And we talked about, building an energy specific API gateway to really enable utilities to be able to do that and open up their data to other parties in the ecosystem. So I think it's a good use case which touches on all these different nuanced variations on how cloud can be used, and hopefully it'll help us guide the shaping of our the reference models that we'll be building, and the cloud approach, really.
Exactly, and what we also faced was that we have a lot of similarities to the other working groups, what we can use, for example, for the data architecture, when we talk about the energy API gateway, to use those definitions to actually bring everything in a standardization or in a reference API model. That's why we said, okay, the next steps is actually to further refine the important issues and focus on specific more requirements, like the high availability, what we had here on the point, or for example the problem regarding latency, what was also faced inside of this group. And what we have for a goal is that over the next weeks, as a complete new working group, we want to define actually 3 to 4 use cases with a deep dive to actually give a guideline for all projects within the LF Energy, but also including identifying some connections to other Linux Foundations, or also some other technologies. And I think today we had a great starting point, actually, also with the cloud providers to get there the insight, and we all agreed that we should focus on more regular meetings to bring this forward. So I'm also inviting here now everybody to join the mailing list and to contribute also to the infrastructure part.
That's great, Sven and Saeed. Okay, so folks, the mailing list is in the window there. I think that there's going to be a lot of movement on this. You know, one of the things that I heard when I was listening is that there are many utilities have obstacles with regards to cloud and a kind of misperception about security or concerns. But, you know, as I said in the meeting, I strongly believe that distributed computing and distributed energy are kind of essential. And so I really appreciate the efforts that you've put in the last month or 6 weeks to make this happen. And I look forward to seeing this as a regular group that gets going. So you guys have the to-do to get these open meetings going, and we will provide any kind of support we can to make that happen. So thanks a lot. Good work. Okay, I'm keeping moving us along because I'm looking at the clock, and asset monitoring, Benoit.
Yeah. So during the first breakout, we went through the plasma architecture, actually the one that is actually being developed by RTE for asset monitoring. And the group assessed it as robust, scalable, reliable infrastructure for asset monitoring, but yeah, noted that it was pretty complex as an infrastructure. And we could gather some recommendation to get in open source. That's we gathered that into the sheet. I'm just looking at it directly. It was dealing with the documentation and we had also a question regarding the fact that we choose Cassandra as a database for plasma. So gather some recommendations, and then we went through the breakout 2. The second one was a bit weird to the attendees, because actually we didn't talk directly code and so on. Actually, the point was how to transition from predictive to preventive to predictive maintenance. And we had a presentation from Aurélien that explained us what is the challenge for our industry to transition from that, to do that transition, and that requires a lot of IT, and that's why Plasma was designed for, but we have nothing yet on that part, and so we're on a blank page. So the first remark regarding this second breakout was, yeah, actually, that was weird to have this kind of discussion during a tech architecture meeting. That raised also the necessity to design a platform that is resilient, very resilient and flexible to different kind of assets and different kind of data to support the algorithm to be able to elaborate health indexes on assets. So we had some discussion on how to elaborate tools for which the relevance of the tool comes mainly from the knowledge of the asset itself. You know, if you want to be able to have a predicting model on the actual state of a transformer or a circuit breaker or whatever, you need to know the story of a bunch of other transformer or circuit breakers to be able to learn or to be able to fit your model. So the recommendation we had is that actually we need to first be able to define the box with the data in, data out, and the data inside of that box, and to be able to define what are the data that will be manipulated by the models, the health models. And so the infrastructure needs to be able to provide a place where you can put your container and with a clear with clear data models. And then you put your container with the trained or fitted with your company own historical data. So this recommendation means that before trying, if you want to develop an asset management or health model, you need first to define on an open source basis. You need first to define these interfaces that you will have to handle, and then and only then you will be able to have the ability to deploy to develop and deploy a specific model for your own needs. And we suggest that as the next step at the beginning of the fall, we could try to implement that recommendation of defining this this data in a study case, for example, based on the circuit breaker. That's it.
That's great. That's really great. So we actually just created a mailing list for you so that folks can actually sign up for asset monitoring, so that when you begin to start up to do kind of a new case study or use case after the summer with regards to circuit breakers, you can do that. Sandra also dropped something in. Sandra, did you want to say anything around part 90-3?
Yeah, so there's a IEC 61850 standard that talks about all the use cases for predictive maintenance. So if you're looking for that, it's right there.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay.
The more there is already defined, the better.
That's perfect. That's great. Good work. Okay. Thank you, Benoit. Thank you for everybody for working on that. Moving along to Compass. Metal, are you taking this or somebody else?
Yes, it's Frederick. I will speak about
okay,
the first
Frederick.
breakout. Yes, I will speak about the first breakout session we will have had. And concerning this, it was a very, very interesting breakout session. And we speak about the Compass roadmap that we have done. And we expose to all the participants what are the great principles that we have decided to implement, and we speak about so the needs that we have and the different blocks we would like to define. For example, we speak about profiling block, specification block, and system configuration block, SIMS conversion tool too, and after to explain this Compass roadmap, we have a work on what issues are met by the different participants concerning the current tools and features from the, which come from the standards. And what the elements that we have had is that the fact actually even if most of the parts are defined in the standard, there is a lot of difficulties concerning the interoperability. And so the biggest challenge of Compass module is to have to make a lot of particular elements interoperable. So, for example, when we spoke about SIM conversion. In fact, SIM each utilities have is SIM profile. So we need to have a functional architecture able to succeed to render these different profiles interoperable and to have the good conversion. That's why it is necessary to have a very flexible and very generic architecture in order to be able to capture all the particularities, or to be able to succeed with the particularization of the different data. But we don't have enough time to go deeper in use feature, but we speak about to go on our discussion with the different media that we have, for example, the wiki, GitHub, or Slack channel to go deeper. So Mital can explain you.
Sure. On some of the other, like we did 2 sessions. So as Frederick mentioned about the function architectures and those features and priorities. On second, technical architectures and technology to choose, and we had a very good inputs, really the next step for us, that we want to continue this technology survey, because the attendees find that this is very important, and we were just could scratch on the surface. So we would like to continue this survey, and we are identifying the platforms to continue that, the documents we can evolve, get references on the projects, and also we discuss about the next steps. We already have a GitHub page, the list link is available there. So identified few key new members probably like potentially could join and contribute as well. So it was very good discussion, and identify few key next steps.
That's great. I love this project, in case anybody had any questions about it, because really the substation is going to become what I think of as the edge node router of the future. And so, getting this right, really laying down the foundations is going to do an enormous amount to accelerate all kinds of things, from microgrids to solar energy to the whole thing, electric mobility. It really hinges on us getting this right. So I love what you guys are doing. Others, if you didn't have chance to go to their sessions, please check out what Matal and Frederick are pointing to. This is an amazing example of people coming together and defining something and using leverage development to create something that, where we know that we need to go. None of us have the resources to do it alone, and we're doing it together. So this is a fantastic example. Thank you very much. And so are you guys meeting regularly? Is there anything you want to say about how to join the project?
Sure. So we have a list here, a link we will share as well. So you can join the group. We have a GitHub now. We were meeting. We closed this first part of our architecture and identify the priorities. So next step, we will communicate how we are going to meet and facilitate the next steps on development as well.
Perfect. Great. Love to have new people join that project. Digital twins. Juanjo, Gianluca, Anto, who's going to take this?
It's going to be me. Sully, it's Juanjo speaking. So I provided there the link we have been using for, let's say, first part of the breakout session, where we bring some presentations. It was pretty exciting because in the recent weeks, and well, even one of the presenters joined us yesterday. We have been able to find out that there are quite a number of relevant teams working on these concepts, and that provides the basis for creating a critical mass moving forward. There is not only interest, but good understanding of digital twin concept. This is something that I think we have been able to realize during the sessions and following the different discussions. We ran several surveys through Mentimeter, so I have provided the link for those who wish to take a look and find what people were answering to the different questions. And I think I feel excited because there is, as I said, a number of organizations really willing to move forward, collaborating around this vision of architecting systems around the notion of digital twin concepts and leveraging on the proposed mechanisms, and namely standard APIs and data models mappings that we had already started. I think it's very important to highlight this idea of data models mapping, because one of the topics that actually was mentioned and discussed during the meeting was that there might be quite well-defined data models in IC SIM and other standards, but then a lot of interoperability problems come with you really go and map them into a particular data format or data structure to be used together with the APIs, because there are, for one single model, there might be thousands of different mappings, all of them which might be quite valid, but yeah, it becomes an issue for interoperability. There was a presentation, very nice, from Sense, a company that has recently joined the group, where they were mentioning that after 10 years working in digital twins and so on, there is still quite an effort that is spent in ETL processes within systems, just for doing this kind of mappings and consolidation. So therefore, it was commonly agreed that if the adoption of a same API and compatible smart data model mappings would be of a really great impact in fostering interoperability and portability. Next, very concrete steps has since now we have found that there are enough number of projects that could that had been developed using the concept, the vision, and relying on the mechanisms. Some of them, which I have to confess, I was not aware of. A bit the intention and what has been discussed was the idea of creating kind of a cluster of open source projects under the umbrella of Linux Foundation Energy, which would have as a common denominator the fact that they would share a vision about architecting systems around this digital twin representation and using these mechanisms that are referred there, the NGSI API as an API for data sharing, sharing of the data of this digital twin representation that the systems will share as basis for interoperability. And also this initiative for which I have provided a link here that is targeted to define concrete data model mappings leveraging on existing energy standards that can be compatible with the NGSI API. Second very concrete step would be that of trying to write a vision white paper, which can help as sort of introduction to people who may and then somehow trying to stimulate that they may join this cluster of projects and the working group moving forward. And third, even though a very perhaps a special thing, but we identified that there is an interesting initiative in Europe that has emerged, which is the European Partnership on Batteries, and which we will try to approach because it seems like they are considering digital twin as a basis for part of their work. So it looks like it could be the right time to influence them and get them on board, which would be quite nice. And I think this was more or less the summary, but if Gianluca or Antonello wish to add something, happy.
That was great. Juanjo, you may also want to, along that line, it's possible that some of the work that Stanford is doing, and I'll make the connection for you, where, you know, modeling charging stations. And so I think that there might be a place where that all connects together. But this is really great. You know, you took an idea, it's something you're passionate about, and you know, over the course of the last, you know, I don't know, 2 months or so, you've brought this to life. So, you know, what I want everyone to recognize is that if you have a passion, if there's something that's really important to you that builds on your technology, or it builds on an integration point that you think is possible, digital twins is a great example of, you know, Juanjo kind of seeing this and then, you know, just, you know, stepping into this as an opportunity. So I love what you guys have done. It's great. Very cool.
Thank you, Sully, for all your support also during the process.
I think it's great. Okay, if it's okay, I'm going to move on to Tef and Ken and Greg around VPP microgrids.
Yep. So I'm going to present for the VPP microgrid team. This is Tef Reed from Sunrun. You know, we basically discussed both VPP and microgrids in great detail. As part of that, there's also a transactive energy conversation that took place and that we want to follow up more for. The top barriers that we saw are really agreement on standards, meaning we want to really dig into the standards basis for microgrids and their interaction with the grid. Next conversation is obviously that's the integration with grid operators, making sure that each virtual power plant, each microgrid isn't a completely custom thing. And then interoperability between microgrids, and the vision there is that VPP virtual power plants, which today are controlling individual assets, should evolve to control groups of assets in microgrids as well. And of course, the final barrier is the regulatory. But we kind of chose as a group that we will focus on demonstrating potential and then worry about how to have the regulation work for these types of solutions. Next slide. So next steps is really streamlining the standards for interconnection, defining integration standards with ADMS and SCADA, define security and trust between edge DER assets and the utility, connecting this working group to other LFE working groups. You know, we know security group had reached out to us. I think that's a good future conversation. I think the group that's working on SIM and digital twins, I think, is another good connection for the future. And then, you know, we have our registration list that we're going to reach out to folks that attended our session today. But I would argue that anybody who is interested on the broader group, interested in what we're doing in VPP microgrids, please go to our Confluence page. And in that Confluence page, we're going to announce our future meetings. And I think really digging into the transactive piece of what we discussed today.
That's great. This makes me super duper happy. I think any of you guys who know me know that you know, I believe in the microgrids. I believe that even, you know, in Europe that has much more stable kind of a much more stable grid, the role of microgrids is going to become increasingly important in order to be able to manage and facilitate, you know, and orchestrate community-based environments. And so I love what you all are doing, and I love that Sunrun, you know, Audrey, I ran into at a conference in Boston in February, and that you just brought this group and they parachuted in and really, look at you, you got yourself a haircut and everything. This is what time off looks like. I just am really thrilled that you guys have taken this and run with it. And it really, I really believe in it. So we put the microgrid mailing list in there, and you know, Audrey or Tef or anybody, you know, we have just a couple of minutes. We can stay a little bit later. This has been a great 5 hours. And I am, you know, I'm very hopeful about this, and I'm very hopeful that we all have done this work together and that it's the beginning. Anything that people want to add kind of as closing, you know, like not long talks, but, you know, a couple of words or something, would love to hear that. Let me just say that, you know, our next steps are that we're going to take all this information, we're going to bring it together, send it, you know, give it back to you, give you access to the recording of the closing session so that you can also learn from that. Make sure that you have all the links that you need. If you want to talk about membership, please reach out to me. And again, you do not need to be a member, just please join us. And any closing statements?
Just real quick, David Wheeler, if you're doing an open source project, I highly encourage getting a CI best practices badge. If you've got questions, shoot me an email. I will do my best to help.
That's great. That's great. I really want to thank, when I say that people have spent thousands of hours on this, since we first met on March 9th and we had no idea what direction we were going on, we have absolutely come together as a community and, you know, really begun to define, this is what the technical architecture of the future looks like. These are the functional parts. These are the components. These are the areas that we can work on together. Others, you know, thank you to my colleagues from the Linux Foundation, and thank you to Lucas and all the folks from Quipo Chat. God, I love you guys. I really, to me, LF Energy and what we're doing here is an absolutely hopeful story about how to move forward into the future.
I would like to give a big thank you to you, Suli, for organizing this. Creating this kind of event is a nightmare, and so I can imagine that the last days and weeks have been really stressful for you and the rest of the team at the Linux Foundation, and just wanted to share my appreciation for all the work you're doing.
Thank you, Wanho. Actually, I have to tell you that this crew did such an amazing job. Naomi is so super organized, so a special call out to Naomi for jumping in, to Celia's stamps. I mean, you guys know how to put something together. You took what we used to do in physical space into a virtual space. It lets us all stay home, even if we have to start at 5 in the morning or be doing something at 2 in the morning. And for that reason, gosh, I'm really thankful, and I hope to do this again soon. Anything else? Some great notes and little love notes in there, and I really appreciate it. So I want everybody to have a good summer, to please get some rest, and love your families, hug your kids, hug your spouses, because this has been a really challenging time, and this is a great beacon of hope. So thank you all for wherever you are in the world.
Thank you. Talk to
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Sully.
you. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Have a nice
Get
rest
some
of the
rest.
day.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank